The card reader beeped twice, and the little red text lit up bright enough that I could see it reflected in the window behind the contractor's head. Transaction declined, insufficient funds. He looked at it, then at me with the particular awkwardness of a man who does this for a living and has clearly seen this exact moment go badly before. Happens sometimes, he said, too quickly, already reaching to swipe again like a second attempt might change the math. Bank hiccup, probably. It wasn't a bank hiccup. I pulled out my phone right there on the half-taped plastic sheeting we'd laid down to protect the floor, opened my banking app and watched the number load. $14.12, where $30,000 was supposed to be sitting. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there in the kitchen we hadn't remodeled yet, surrounded by sample tile squares and a folder of countertop swatches Sarah and I had spent 3 weekends narrowing down, and I felt something in my chest go very still, the way a room goes still right before something in the walls gives out. Sarah was standing by the sink. I watched the color leave her face in real time, watched her hand come up and press flat against her mouth, and some part of me, some stupid, hopeful, 8 years married part of me, thought for half a second that she was about to tell me our account had been hacked, that someone had stolen it, that we were victims together. I can explain, she said instead, and my stomach dropped somewhere past the floor. Explain what, Sarah? Julian needed it. He's been so depressed, he needed to get away, he needed this trip, and her voice cracked. I sent it to him 2 days ago, all of it. The contractor, to his credit, had already started backing toward the front door, murmuring something about giving us a minute, about rescheduling, the tone of a man who very badly wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't scream. I want to be honest about that because I think people expect the version of this story where I screamed, where I threw something, where the walls shook. I didn't. I stood in that kitchen and felt 2 years of my life turn to ash in about 4 seconds, and what came out of me instead was very, very quiet. You gave my brother $30,000. He's my brother, not just yours, and he needed. It wasn't your money to give away, Sarah. It was never just yours. That was when her face shifted, fear collapsing into something harder, more familiar. The tone she used when she'd already decided she was the one being wrong. How can you be so selfish? He is genuinely struggling and all you care about is granite countertops. Do you hear yourself right now? I want to go back to the beginning, before I tell you what I said to that. Because you need to understand exactly what those $30,000 cost me before you understand exactly how far past selfish I was willing to go. I started picking up every overtime shift my firm would let me take almost exactly 2 years before that morning. I'm a civil engineer. The overtime wasn't glamorous site inspections that ran past dark, weekend consulting jobs I picked up on the side. A stretch of 4 months where I didn't take a single Saturday off. I drove the same 8-year-old sedan through all of it. The one with the check engine light I'd learned to ignore because fixing it meant spending money that was supposed to go somewhere else. We skipped 2 Christmases with my side of the family because plane tickets weren't in the budget. We skipped a friend's destination wedding. I packed lunch every single day for 2 years, peanut butter sandwiches in a scratched Tupperware container I kept meaning to replace and never did, because replacing it felt like admitting I could afford to. Sarah and I built that number together, at least on paper, a shared spreadsheet color-coded, a savings goal line that crept upward every 2 weeks when my paycheck landed. We'd sit on the couch some nights and just look at it. 22,000, 26, 28.9. We picked out the counters we wanted before we'd even finished saving for them, because looking at swatches felt like a reward for shifts I hadn't taken yet. I want to be precise about something because it matters. 90% of that money came from my overtime. Not because Sarah didn't work, she did, a steady job with steady hours, but because the extra, the sacrifice, the actual blood of it, that was mine. Weekends, holidays. A body that ached in places a 33-year-old's body shouldn't ache yet. I never once thought of it as my money instead of ours. I want that on the record too. I thought of it as the thing we were building together, the same as the marriage itself. Something you don't keep score on, because keeping score would mean you didn't fully trust the person across the table from you. That, it turns out, was the mistake. Julian was 24. He'd quit his last job, an entry-level warehouse position, 8 months before any of this happened, and the reason, when pressed, always shifted depending on who was asking and how sympathetic they seemed. To me, once at a family dinner, he'd said the schedule didn't work for him. To Sarah, apparently, it had become something closer to a mental health crisis requiring immediate, expensive intervention. He lived with their parents. He posted constantly about needing to find himself, about how the corporate grind wasn't built for people like him, about wellness and boundaries and healing, all of it phrased in a way that somehow always implied someone else should be the one paying for the healing. Sarah had a blind spot where Julian was concerned that I'd noticed early in our marriage and made the mistake of thinking I could love around. Whatever he needed, she found a way to justify. When he'd needed rent money the year before, she'd quietly sent $400 from our joint account and told me about it a week later, framed as an emergency, framed as a one-time thing. I hadn't fought her on it. $400 felt like a small enough hill. I didn't know, standing in that kitchen with a declined card reader, that I'd been slowly training her to believe the hill could always get bigger and I'd always, eventually, come around. I was wrong about a lot of things that morning. That was the one that hurt the most to understand. He needed this and you're standing here worried about a kitchen, Sarah said again, voice rising, the words arranging themselves into the shape of a woman who had rehearsed this justification long before she'd ever needed to say it out loud. You have a good job. You'll make it back. Julian doesn't have that. He doesn't have anything. He has $30,000 of mine right now, I said. That's not nothing. It's not yours, it's ours. Then why didn't you ask me? She didn't have an answer for that, not a real one. What she had instead was a fresh wave of tears and a repeated insistence that I was choosing granite over her brother's well-being, that I was cold, that I didn't understand real suffering, that money wasn't supposed to matter this much between people who loved each other. I let her finish. I stood very still and let every sentence land because I wanted to remember exactly what she sounded like in that moment. I wanted to remember it clearly enough that I'd never again wonder on some future weeknight whether I'd overreacted. I hadn't overreacted. If anything, I was about to underreact by comparison to what was coming. I walked past her, out to the driveway where the contractor was loading his tools back into his truck bed, looking apologetic in the way people look when they've stumbled into somebody else's disaster. I handed him $50 for his time and told him I'd call to reschedule once things were sorted out. He nodded like he understood exactly what sorted out was doing a lot of quiet work to cover. Then I got in my car. I didn't go back inside. I didn't finish the conversation. I drove straight across town to a bank Sarah and I had never used, walked in, and told the associate at the desk that I wanted to open a new checking account. In my name only. Just yourself on the account, she asked, typing. Just myself, I said, for now. That last part, for now, I didn't say out loud to explain anything to her. I said it because some part of me, even in that first raw hour, already knew this wasn't the end of what I was about to do. It was the first step of it. Monday morning, before I'd even had coffee, I called my HR department and changed my direct deposit information. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes to redirect 2 years of future overtime, future raises, future everything, into an account Sarah didn't know existed and couldn't touch. I remember sitting in the parking lot of my office afterward, engine off, just breathing, feeling the strange, hollow quiet of having done something enormous that nobody around me could see yet. I called a divorce attorney that same afternoon. Not a general practice family lawyer. I'd done enough research the night before, sitting up long after Sarah had cried herself to sleep on the far edge of the bed, to know I needed someone who specialized in exactly this. Forensic asset recovery, marital dissipation. The legal term I learned for what Sarah had done. Intentionally depleting shared marital funds for a purpose that benefits one spouse or a third party without the consent of the other, particularly when done to keep those funds out of an equitable division. Her name was Whitman. She had a corner office with almost nothing personal in it, which I found oddly reassuring. Walk me through the timeline, she said, and I did the 2 years, the spreadsheet, the wire transfer, the contractor, the $14.12. She took notes without any visible reaction until I mentioned that Sarah had made the transfer 2 days before the contractor arrived, not 2 days after some new development in Julian's life. 2 days before a scheduled $10,000 deposit was due, she repeated back to me, That's not impulsive, that's time. I hadn't let myself think about it that way yet. Once she said it, I couldn't unthink it. I want everything, I told her. The transfer reversed or repaid, and I want the divorce filed. Both are doable, she said. But the dissipation claim moves faster and hits harder if we file it as an emergency motion alongside the divorce petition, rather than waiting to litigate it as part of the general asset division later. It puts pressure on the timeline immediately, and it puts pressure on your brother-in-law directly, not just your wife. That was the first time I felt something other than grief since the kitchen. It was small and it was cold, and it felt something like relief. I served Sarah 4 days later. A process server met her in the office parking lot where she worked, which I'd known would happen and hadn't stopped. Because at a certain point, protecting someone's dignity stops being your job once they've stopped protecting yours. She called me 11 times that afternoon. I didn't answer any of them until the 12th, mostly because Whitman had told me flatly that anything I said to Sarah directly now could complicate the filing, and I needed it clean. "You're divorcing me over this?" Her voice, when I finally picked up, had lost every trace of the righteous anger from the kitchen. What was left underneath it sounded a lot smaller. "It's just money. We can figure this out." "It's not just money, Sarah. It's a legal claim now, there's a difference. You're suing my brother, he's going to lose everything. He has $30,000 of mine. If losing it means losing everything, that tells you something about how little of it was actually his to begin with." She didn't have anything to say to that. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line, ragged, and for one brief, treacherous second, I felt the old instinct rise up in me. The instinct to soften, to offer a way out, to be the reasonable one the way I'd been the reasonable one for 8 straight years. I let the instinct pass through me and out the other side. It didn't stay. "I've also canceled the joint credit cards," I said. "You'll get a letter about that separately. I'm not trying to leave you with nothing. Whitman's already structuring a fair division of the actual joint accounts. But the $30,000 isn't part of that division. That's a separate claim and it's coming back, one way or another." "You're being cruel. I spent 2 years skipping vacations to build that number, Sarah. I think we have very different definitions of cruel." The credit card cancellations hit her harder than the divorce papers had, as far as I could tell from the outside. Whitman warned me this would happen, that people who feel entitled to shared resources often don't fully register the loss until the resources themselves stop functioning in real time, at a grocery store checkout, at a gas pump. Sarah texted me 3 days later, a photo of a declined receipt at a pharmacy, no caption, just the image. I didn't respond. It wasn't cruelty. It was the exact same red text that had greeted me in my own kitchen 10 days earlier, just arriving somewhere new. The emergency motion for dissipation was filed that same week. Whitman walked me through what it would ask the court to do: freeze any remaining marital assets, formally recognize the $30,000 transfer as an improper dissipation of joint funds. And this was the part I hadn't expected to be possible. The part that made me sit up a little straighter in her office, named Julian as a third-party recipient subject to a fraudulent conveyance claim, meaning the court could order him, personally, to return the money, not just Sarah. He accepted funds he had every reason to know were part of a couple's joint savings, Whitman explained. Under fraudulent conveyance law, a recipient who takes property transferred to defeat a legitimate claim, in this case, your equitable interest in marital assets, can be ordered to return it, regardless of whether he spent it. Even if he already spent it. Even then, he'll just have to find the money somewhere else. Sell something, borrow it, whatever it takes. That's not our problem to solve for him. I thought about the Instagram photos Sarah had shown me months earlier, Julian standing next to a motorcycle he'd apparently been eyeing for over a year, captioning it something about manifesting his dreams. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I thought about it very differently now. Serve him too, I said, wherever he is. Julian, it turned out, was in Paris. 4 days into his trip, staying at a hostel near the Gare du Nord. According to a public post Sarah had liked that I found through an old shared login neither of us had bothered to remove. International service of legal process is slower and stranger than domestic service. Whitman had to route it through a process that took nearly 2 weeks, working with a local process server who specialized in exactly this kind of thing, tracking Julian through the hostel's booking records to a specific address on a specific date. I wasn't there for it, obviously. I only know what Whitman told me afterward, relayed secondhand through the international server's report. A 24-year-old man in a hostel common room, hungover, being handed an envelope by a stranger who spoke accented English and asked him to confirm his identity before making him sign for it. Inside, a legal notice informing him that funds in his possession, $30,000, wired to him 9 days earlier, were the subject of a fraudulent conveyance claim in a U.S. family court, and that he was required to appear or retain counsel or risk a default judgment ordering full repayment. He called Sarah within the hour, according to the message I later saw in the discovery documents. The first line, verbatim, has stayed with me since I read it. "What did you two do? They're saying I have to give it back. Not is everything okay asterisk. Not what happened, just the money, just the fear of losing what he'd already decided was his." I looked at that message for a long time the night I first read it. It told me everything I needed to know about exactly what kind of trip that $30,000 had actually been funding, and exactly how little either of them had thought, even for a second, that any of it belonged to me. The hearing took place on a Tuesday morning, in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee from the machine down the hall. Sarah sat at the opposing table in a blazer I didn't recognize, her attorney a tired-looking man who kept glancing at his own file like it was arguing against him too. Judge Reyes had our bank statements spread in front of her, along with Whitman's exhibit binder, the spreadsheet Sarah and I had built together, printed in full, every color-coded entry a small, silent testimony to 2 years of overtime shifts. Next to it, the wire transfer confirmation. $30,000, executed 9 days before a scheduled $10,000 deposit, sent solely under Sarah's login credentials, with no corresponding withdrawal authorization from a joint account holder. "Counsel," the judge said, looking over her glasses at Sarah's attorney, "your client transferred the entirety of a designated joint savings fund to a third party 2 days before a scheduled payment tied to that exact fund. I'm having difficulty understanding how this reads as anything other than deliberate dissipation." Sarah's attorney tried anyway, something about family emergencies, about the flexible nature of joint accounts, about intent being hard to prove. Whitman didn't even stand for her response. "Your Honor, we have text messages, entered as Exhibit C, in which Mrs. Sarah discusses the timing of the transfer explicitly with her brother 3 months prior to execution, specifically referencing the need to move the funds before, quote, he notices." I watched something in Sarah's face fold when that exhibit went up on the screen. I hadn't known about the 3-month planning until Whitman's discovery request pulled the messages. Neither had the version of me standing in that kitchen with a declined card reader. It hadn't been a panicked decision born out of sisterly love. It had been a plan, built quietly under the same roof where I was still packing peanut butter sandwiches to save gas money. The ruling came down within the hour. The transfer was declared an unauthorized dissipation of marital assets. Sarah was ordered to contribute toward repayment from her share of any future division. And Julian, appearing by video link from a lawyer's office in the city, having flown home 4 days into his trip, once his own accounts were frozen pending the claim, was ordered to return the full $30,000 as the direct recipient of a fraudulent conveyance. He didn't have it. $9,000 of it was already gone: hostel bookings, train tickets, a leather jacket he'd apparently decided he needed in Florence. What remained of the money, plus the value of what he'd bought with it, would have to come from somewhere. The motorcycle went up for auction 3 weeks later. $10,000, cash down payment, the bike he'd captioned "manifesting my dreams about," sold at a loss to a stranger through a court-ordered liquidation notice. The proceeds wired directly to an escrow account under Whitman's supervision. I didn't watch it happen. I didn't need to. Whitman sent me the confirmation email with the subject line *asset recovered, and I read it standing in my new kitchen, the one I hadn't built yet, in an apartment I hadn't signed the lease on yet, in a life that, for the first time in longer than I could remember, belonged entirely to me. The house sold 2 months after the ruling. Neither of us wanted to keep living in it, for reasons that had stopped needing explanation somewhere around the second courtroom appearance. My share of the equity, combined with the recovered $30,000 minus what Julian's liquidated assets and remaining wages could actually cover, which came out close enough to whole that I stopped counting the difference, landed in the account I'd opened alone that first terrible morning. Sarah moved back into her parents' house. Julian was already there, having sold the motorcycle and quietly, from what I heard through a cousin who still spoke to both of us, taken a warehouse job again. The same kind of job he'd once said didn't work for him, now apparently working for him just fine when the alternative was owing a federal judgment. I don't know what they say to each other now in that house about the trip or the money or the version of events where I was the selfish one for caring about a kitchen. I've stopped needing to know. I found a downtown apartment with good light, and eventually the kitchen I'd actually been saving for 2 years to build, smaller than the one in the old house, but entirely mine, granite counters I picked without needing to compromise on the color. A contractor I paid in full, on time, with a card that didn't decline. The first night I cooked in that kitchen, I stood at the counter longer than I needed to, just running my hand along the stone, feeling how solid it was, how it didn't ask anything of me it hadn't already been paid for. Nobody was in that kitchen with me. Nobody needed to be. For 2 years, I'd built something meant to be shared. It took one wire transfer to learn exactly how alone I'd actually been the whole time. It took one courtroom to learn how to stop being alone quietly and start being alone on my own terms instead.